It's a status quo hire for a franchise that seemed to be signaling it needed a change.
It's time now for Nuff Said with Bob Koshinski. Brought to you by Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, home of the famous spaghetti parm, and WEC Radio, the Big WEC, home of the oldies. On this episode, Bob's guest is WIVB's online reporter, Jonah Bronstein.
Welcome back to another edition of Nuff Said with yours truly, and it's been a busy week since the last podcast. And it's been very tough scheduling guests when you've got not just the weather, but breaking sports news and scheduled news conferences. So we're going to get into it today. We finally have some time to talk about what's been going on. But I want to give a shout out, of course, to Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, where we do the podcast each week. We're in the French Connection Room. You want to stop down and have some of their delicious spaghetti parm. And the Big WEC, Buddy Shula. They're big supporters of the podcast. We listen to WEC Radio. I ask you to do that as well. And don't forget to subscribe to Nuff Said with yours truly. But today we have Jonah Bronstein from WIVB Online, an excellent reporter. And Jonah, thanks so much for making it out here on just another crappy day in Western New York. And with everything going on, even when we scheduled this yesterday, it's like when is the news conference going to be? So that would have sent everything off the rails. So the Bills fire Sean McDermott. We're going to get into that. It was announced yesterday that they have hired Joe Brady, who was their offensive coordinator, which has been received rather poorly amongst many Bills fans. I know there's some polls out there and whatnot, and Abraham Lincoln said something about pleasing all the people all the time. I think I've changed that quote around. But I think the surprise was, after such a dramatic move, you basically stick with somebody who's been in-house. And yes, they did interview a lot of candidates, but they stayed with what they know, right?
Yeah, it's a perplexing turn of events, and that doesn't mean that you can't make sense of it or that the Bills won't be able to make sense of it when they hold their press conferences and as time goes along explaining their decision-making. And it doesn't mean that it won't work on the football field and lead to the results that the Bills and their fans want. But trying to wrap your head around, it's a status quo hire for a franchise that seemed to be signaling it needed a change. And it did make a change in who was the head coach, but the offensive coaching staff is going to remain largely in place, and a lot of things and culture-wise will stay somewhat the same. There'll be some changes, but it's not a total new direction, and it's not an unfamiliar name to the fans. And it's a offense coordinator who's had a ton of success. The Bills have been the best offense by some metrics since he took over, and other metrics, number 2 or things like that, ranking very high in all of the seasons that he's been the offensive coordinator. But Bills fans were running out of patience with some of his play calling, and I just know from the reaction from people I know and online that there were Bills fans during the season that thought the offensive coordinator needed to go, that was the change that needed to be made. I'm not sure I agree with that, but if the Bills were making moves to please the fans, it turned out the McDermott firing was very unpopular, and promoting Brandon Beane, not popular either. So in terms of public relations and public sentiment and approval ratings and things like that, these past 2 weeks have not gone very well for the Bills.
I was watching a podcast with Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Fitz and Wit podcast, and he actually spoke with Brandon Beane on the phone. And Brandon Beane told him they were looking for a CEO, and I think he mentioned this in the news conference last week. And they felt that Brady answered all the questions correctly, talking about CEO. Now, personally, I think what had happened was there was a toxic relationship between Beane and McDermott at the end of the day. So they're going to create whatever scenario they need to. They're not going to want to come out and just say we had a falling out between the two men who reported to Terry Pagula, which they've changed that line of report, and now the coach has to report to Brandon Beane, which makes me question the term CEO. Brandon Beane is the CEO of the football team. The coach is the coach. And I like it when businessmen use football terms to describe their industry and when football guys use business terms to describe their industry. If you say, I want a coach who can coach the team, that there's so many things that fall under that. Now they've used the term CEO. And I thought the one thing McDermott probably did right was if you want to use that term, he was a good CEO. He changed the culture. Players loved playing for him. It was game decisions that seemed to be his downfall at times.
Yeah, well, in big businesses, they have CEOs who do effective jobs, and then sometimes, for whatever reason, they change CEOs. So it's not really uncommon for management changes to be required or to come about for different reasons, and sometimes they work well for the business, or in this case, the football team, sometimes they don't. But it is interesting. The Bills don't have a CEO, but they have two presidents, Pete Gwelly and Brandon Beane. Pete Gwelly has the title of Chief Operating Officer, so COO. And as you mentioned, Brandon Beane is now promoted to President of Football Operations and a long tenured general manager. They have two assistant general managers. Those are the business executives. Joe Brady is the head football coach, and they want maybe CEO-style leadership out of him. And from what's being reported and from what is leaking out, that was how he pitched himself in the interview, and they liked what he had to say about running the team like a CEO and not just being an offensive play caller, but hiring good staff and leading both sides of the ball and the special teams and decision-making and things like that. And they know Joe Brady's been in the building for 2.5 years now, and they understand his personality, how the players react to him, how the other coaches react to him, and how he will lead in that CEO-type role. But he's 35 years old. He's never been a head coach. He has had success as an offensive coordinator calling plays, and some of these other offensive coordinators that the Bills were looking at were even younger and hadn't called plays. But he hasn't been an offensive coordinator for a long time. He hasn't worked for a lot of head coaches. And you would think that a lot of what he learned about how to be a head coach came from Sean McDermott. So I think he'll do things differently, but a lot of what he do will probably be, this worked with Sean McDermott. We won 12, 13 games the years I was here. We won playoff games. We've been one of the best teams in the league. So why would he change too much?
So I posted something last week because a source close to Josh Allen indicated they were looking at Clint Kubiak. And I certainly wasn't alone. That was a name that was out there for quite some time. And, the dynamics may have changed because Seattle kept winning, and now they can't talk to Kubiak till after the Super Bowl. But I don't know if – you'll never know. You know how it works with sources, right? Mm-hmm. Was Clint Kubiak actually a serious contender? A lot of local people like Brian Dable because he is a Buffalonian. Some coaches have said, having dealt with Dable in the past, that he should be president of the Buffalo Chamber of Commerce because he's always talking up Buffalo and West New York. And I know that Allen would have loved Dable, I assume. But Josh was in on the interviews. So let me ask you this. So there's enough pressure on this guy to begin with. He obviously understands the entire team's success, for the most part, has rested on his shoulders for the last 5 years. Now they make him part of the interview process. So if this coaching decision doesn't go well, he's also got that on his resume for things that he was a part of. At what point, do you think at some point this guy's just going to break?
Well, we might have seen a little bit of that in the post game in Denver. I mean, I think it's understandable how emotional he was because of the emotional ending to that game and the way he played and the season and the pressure that was on Josh Allen just to win, and the local pressure that the Bills faced this season, coming into the year thinking they were Super Bowl favorites, the schedule, the stadium, starting 4-0, and then as the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Bengals fell off and there didn't seem to be any other juggernauts in the AFC, and this national groundswell of an opinion that the Bills had to win it this year. This was their best chance, and somebody was going to lose their job if they didn't, or the Bills would be at a crisis point if they didn't win the Super Bowl this year. Then they didn't get past the divisional round. And Josh Allen, he's been sad and emotional after the season-ending loss every year, but this was more so. And it seemed to get more and more as the last few years went by. He's taken these losses harder and kind of acted like an older quarterback that this isn't the case, but this is the way he's acted in those press conferences. Acted like an older quarterback that isn't going to get back there next year, or is not going to have this opportunity, or like a senior in college or a senior in high school that says this was it and we're not going to have another chance. The Bills are probably going to have more chances. Now the window is tightening or shortening, but I don't think this is the end of the line. But there might have been a sense, who knows if he knew or who knew, but looking back, you can sense that the way Josh Allen reacted, the way Sean McDermott reacted a little bit out of character and complaining about the officiating call and being more emotional for him than he is in press conferences, Deion Dawkins' emotions after the game, that maybe that locker room knew that things were going to change because they didn't make it to the Super Bowl this year. And I don't know if they knew it was Sean McDermott or they thought it was somebody else, but it did seem like the Bills reacted to this loss a little differently than they've reacted to the past losses, where in the past they'd lose to the Chiefs and there was a little bit of sentiment of, man, we gave it our all, and this Chiefs team, Patrick Mahomes, is unbeatable. That wasn't the case here with Denver, and it wasn't how the Bills reacted to it. I think Josh Allen will be fine. Now he has this foot injury that he might need surgery on and going to have a recovery period in the offseason, and he's getting older. But I think mentally and emotionally he likes Joe Brady, and I think he'll come into next season with the right mindset and the right emotional frame. But we'll see what happens if they lose in the playoffs again.
I think some of the pressure on Allen is a result of he didn't play Josh Allen 100% football against the Broncos. I felt if he played against Denver like he played against Jacksonville, they would have won that game. The turnovers, the fumble before the half, I mean, that literally was a high school mistake. And it does really blow my mind when you think this guy who's been in the league as long as he has and who has been talked to about, ball security and turnovers and whatnot, that he would even think of attempting that play, but it happened. And I know he's taken some criticism nationally for not being a closer. You look at their last 3 losses in the playoffs, he had the ball last. And I know after the 13-second game, everybody said, oh, why can't our guy be the last guy with the football because he's going to take us down the field. He had the ball. He had the ball against Denver. Now, they beat Jacksonville. He had the ball second to last, and he did what he had to do. Last year against Kansas City, he had the ball, again, second to last, but because the 4th down play didn't go their way, and I think Kincaid's got to take some of the responsibility on that play as well because he had a chance to catch the ball. But, you parse through all these things. At the end of the day, they've been a very good team. They've been right there. I think the frustration of being right there and not being able to close, and I understand. It wasn't well said, but I understand what Terry Pagula meant when he said we hit the playoff wall. It's like, how many times do we have to experience this? We've got to do something. But they didn't really do a drastic change. They've stayed with what they know because they must feel in some way, at least I think Brandon does, what we're doing is right. We just need to tweak a couple things.
Yeah, and this wasn't what was said, and even some of the things that were said went against this line of thinking, but I think it was very telling when Brandon Beane was asked about the perception that there was a power struggle, and Terry Pagula interjected. The question wasn't directed at him, but he interjected and made a comment that he doesn't like power plays, and that wasn't about his hockey team. That was about his football organization, and that if you try to make a power play, you're out. And we've seen that a little bit with maybe some of the business executives in the Pagula operation. And he was talking about Brandon Beane and defending Brandon Beane and saying Brandon Beane didn't pull a power play. But I think looking back on it, you can read into that maybe Sean McDermott did assert power or at least cause friction between this working relationship that had worked so well for many years. McBean, remember we used to call them that, and McDermott, they've said he didn't hire Brandon Beane, but we know that he had some influence and role in bringing Brandon Beane in from Carolina and moving on from Doug Whaley. And they worked together very well for many years, but that relationship broke down a bit over the last couple of seasons. And I think some of that is just the pressure to win, and they weren't getting all the way to the Super Bowl, and I think it's natural in any high-stakes situation for some finger-pointing to occur. But it seems like Terry Pagula decided that the finger-pointer was the one that needed to go, and that Brandon Beane maybe had handled that better And in Terry Pegula's opinion, and I think I share this opinion with him, the roster was pretty good. There were some moves that didn't work out. The defensive line, they put a lot of investment into it this year, and injuries and things like that. It didn't give them what they thought they was going to get. The wide receivers, which I think the coaching staff had something to do with how that position unit has been rebuilt over the last couple of years, but that wasn't good enough this year. But I don't think all of that is Brandon Beane's blame to take. But overall, since he came in after that 2017 draft that Sean McDermott did pretty well with, but after that, I think Brandon Beane's drafted well. Hasn't done so great with his first-round picks in recent seasons, but overall has drafted well, signed good players, re-signed the players that they've drafted, and they've had one of the better rosters in the league year after year after year. And I think the coaching has been good too, but the defensive coaching has let the Bills down in these playoff losses. McDermott's a defensive coach, and that playoff wall seemed to be that they're going to give up 30-plus points in the most important game in the playoffs and not make it to the Super Bowl because they've had a playoff-caliber defense, but they haven't yet to have a championship-caliber defense in the postseason. And McDermott being a defensive head coach maybe took some of the blame for that. Now, I think the defense going forward is really going to determine the Bills' success. The offense is going to be good no matter what, as long as Josh Allen's healthy, and the Bills still will have a good offensive line and James Cook. And it's being reported that the favorite for the defense coordinator is Jim Leonard. There's a lot to like about him. He's a bit of a rising star in coaching. With Denver was, if not the best defense in the league, the best pass defense, the best pass rush. Well, the Bills had the best pass defense. Some experience with Rex Ryan, which I don't know if Bills fans like to hear that, but somebody who is an aggressive defensive play caller. But younger, hasn't been a defensive coordinator in the NFL yet, wasn't calling the plays in Denver, and from what I've read, runs a 3-4 base defense. And I think there's a lot of risk if the Bills make changes on defense that make certain players that they've drafted or brought in not imperfect fits. And if that's, remember with Rex Ryan, the Bills had a very good defense under Jim Schwartz. Rex Ryan comes in, you think the defense is going to get even better, and it got worse because those players didn't fit his defense, they didn't learn it well, and things got worse. The Bills can't afford that because the offense is going to be good, I think, no matter what, and especially with this offensive head coach. If the defense goes through a transition and regresses even for a year or two, the Bills aren't going to a Super Bowl with a worse defense that they've had now, and they didn't fire the defensive-minded head coach that had the number one pass defense and a top 10 defense this past year to get worse on defense. That's going backwards.
This is the old line, figures lie and liars figure. The Bills had the best pass defense because the run defense was so bad. I mean, how many teams just gashed them for an incredible amount of yards?
But they've been a good pass defense
yes.
Year in and year out. That's McDermott's specialty, and the defensive backs that they have and the linebackers, the back six actually, the way the Bills play, or back seven, fit really well with McDermott's defense. And this defense, maybe it gets better under Jim Leonard in a different style, but I don't think that pass defense and that back seven personnel is going to fit as well right away, and there's some risk there for the early portion of the Joe Brady tenure of how that defense looks.
Well, the thing that drove me absolutely crazy over McDermott's term as head coach is with his defense was their incredible ability to give up long yardage on 3rd and long. It happened against Denver. Because they would fall back into that soft zone and almost look at each other like, well, how's that guy so wide open? Everybody's 20 yards apart. That has been a bugaboo with this team since, McDermott got here. That's just how he plays it now. And I think that's why his numbers, his passing, they don't give up the long pass play. They rarely do, as far as going over the top. He's very good. He was very good at that. But they tend to give up that play. I can go back to when they were in the playoffs against Houston, Josh Allen's first playoff game. They were up 60-0 in that game. And, suddenly they started lining up. Talk about how far back I'm going. But I still remember an incredible 3rd and long in that game that they gave up like 20 yards in the 3rd down play because that's just how they play it. Enough said. Okay, so the Bills' defense is going to be, you're right, to me, the key. Whoever they bring in to be their defensive coach, they've got to shore it up. But I'm guessing Matt Milano's probably not going to be back, right?
Contractually, yeah, probably not. I mean, the Bills could re-sign him, but the way they redid that deal a year ago signaled that they were moving on from him and sending him to free agency to try to get his money somewhere else.
He did play some of his best football the last month of the season, too. He was finally healthy. Bosa, you think he's gone?
I think he's gone. I think his I saw an Instagram post of his wife kind of saying, thanks for the memories in Buffalo, and I just think with his age and the one-year deal and the cap that the Bills won't be re-signing him.
Ed Oliver, he came back, got hurt in the game. Hurt his, I don't know which knee he hurt, but he was unavailable in the second half. He's got health issues.
I think he'll be back. I mean, there's probably an argument for the Bills moving on from that contract right now, but I think it's one of those where they'll take a pretty big cap hit, and the cap relief will be more in the future than this year. And he is, when healthy, one of their best players, and not their best defensive lineman. This might be the year he needs to really develop into a star to justify being on the team beyond this year. But there's also, perhaps they could double down on that contract and restructure it to get some cap relief, but also tie themselves into having him even longer.
Bernard, I mean, he may be in trouble with a new defensive coordinator because obviously he's undersized. They bring in Shaq from Carolina, who outplayed him. I mean, the defense was better with him on the field. The new defensive coordinator may reevaluate that.
Yeah, he's absolutely one of those players that seem to fit McDermott's style of defense better than other styles of defense, and might not have a natural position in a different defensive alignment. But he could also move from middle linebacker and take over that outside, weak side role that Matt Milano played and be even better. The Bills seem to lose some confidence in him over this past season. And contractually, he just signed a new deal last year. He's on the team. So it'll be the new defensive coordinator. He's one of those players that the Bills have to figure out how to use and not give up on. Christian Benford's their best cornerback. He's not going anywhere, but he seemed very well suited to Sean McDermott's style of defense, style of coverage, and a different pass defense, different style for the cornerbacks. More press man might not fit Christian Benford as well. He might not be an all-pro caliber cornerback in a different defense.
A lot of changes, a lot of decisions. The news conference will be held tomorrow. I don't know. You think Terry Pagula will be there?
I think he'll be there. I'm not certain that he'll take questions and speak in the same way, but I think he'll give an introductory statement and be there. I'll be interested to see if Brandon Beane takes more questions, because I think there are questions to ask and to be answered, but usually at these coach press conferences, it's the coach taking most of the questions. I think Josh Allen's going to talk tomorrow too, and it'll be interesting to see.
You do?
Well, Josh Allen's going to talk sometime soon. It was told he didn't speak on locker cleanout day, and it was told that he will speak after the Bills have a new coach. So I do think that we haven't been told that he's going to be available on Thursday, but I do think that that's very possible, and if it's not Thursday, it'll be soon after.
Do you believe the story of why Allen didn't speak on Sunday, the day after the game?
I want to take the Bills and their public relations at face value. I was there. I do think that on Sunday, the PR people that were there telling us why Allen wasn't speaking were telling the truth, that they understand it. But I think things might have been developing on Sunday that not everybody knew about, and that might have played a role. But I don't want to go so far as to say I think that Josh Allen knew and that's why he didn't speak. I think things happened parallel to each other. But it is curious. He's spoken on locker cleanout day every other year after other painful losses and after other times when he had some minor injuries that needed to be taken care of. But he had more injuries this year, and I think he had more to deal with. He did speak after the game, and most every player that spoke after the game didn't speak on locker cleanout day. But it was told to us that he'd be speaking later that week. It wasn't said that, hey, he's not going to speak again until after we introduce a new head coach.
I've heard some rumblings, some talk about maybe even changes in the communication department over there. We had the infamous misspelled word in the statement about letting Sean McDermott go, which was, admiral instead of admirable. Having done that job in other areas, once that's sent out, there's no fixing it. I mean, you can try to send out a new release, but the mistake's been made. But I've heard some criticism about just not prepping Pagula properly before that news conference. And having worked with ownership, that's much easier said than done. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and Terry Pegula has spoken in that manner before, and just about every time he's spoken. And this was the first time in a very long time that he sat down and took questions about either of his sporting franchises, and even longer with the Bills, because the last time he did that was a Sabres move after they changed general managers. And I don't know how it works now, but I knew in the past when it was One Buffalo, Pegula Sports and Entertainment, the Bills had a PR staff, the Sabres had a PR staff, and PSE had different PR people.
Right.
Now there's no more PSE, but I don't think Bills PR has the same role and the same ability to prep Terry Pegula for that press conference that they do Brandon Beane and the coaches and things like that. Maybe they did in this particular case, but it would have been coming in a bit of a rush job, and I don't think the structure was in place to have Terry Pegula as prepared for that press conference as he should have been, because he hasn't done very many press conferences, and it's been a very long time since he's done them.
Joan, I want to thank you for coming out in this weather. It'll be an interesting news conference tomorrow, and we'll all be tuned in.
Yeah, always happy to be here.
Jonah Bronstein from WIVB online, and he does a great job. I want to, again, say hello to all our viewers out there. Next week, we welcome a brand new sponsor to the podcast, Rich Entertainment. Glad to have them on board. And, of course, Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant. You can't get better spaghetti and meatballs anywhere in Western New York. And in the Big Weck. Buddy Shula has built a mega radio station out there. I tune in all the time, so why don't you? Subscribe to the Nuff Said with Bob Koshinski podcast. Until next time, have yourself a good night and a much better tomorrow.